Howdy folks, and welcome back to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making stuffed peppers. Stuffed peppers are one of those meals where you're going to gom up half the dishes in your kitchen, unfortunately. And I'm making a whole bunch of them today because we have a lot of company coming over. Of course, you're going to start with some bell peppers. And today I have 6 whole bell peppers. And when I make them, I cut them in half. I already have the rest of them back here in my pot full of water. I'm going to boil those and blanch them before I put them in my pan to bake them. Show you how to cut those up. I have 3 cups of water that has a couple tablespoons of butter in it and a little sea salt. I'm going to add a cup and a half of long grain rice to that. It will have to be boiled for 20 minutes. I've got 2 pounds of fresh ground beef and some chopped onions for that. I'm going to use about 3 cups of shredded cheddar cheese, or 12 ounces, to make this many. And you need a large baking dish to put them in when you get everything cooked. I like to use tomato soup in this recipe, and I search really hard to find tomato soup that does not have high fructose corn syrup in it and does not have artificial flavors or MSGs or anything added. And we're going to need, of course, salt and pepper. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to cut your peppers all the way around. And I know a lot of people don't cut their peppers in half, but I do. And then you're going to take your knife and go around the stem. And when you do that, your pepper will come in half just like that. And you want to clean out all these seeds and this white stuff. Dump my onions in here with my hamburger meat, and I'll just use this to show it to you. You can just use your hand to clean out the inside of this. If it happens to be a little bit stiff, you can use your knife again if you need to. And you want to wash these before you use them. And now we just want to take these over to the sink and wash them off, and we'll add them into our pot with the rest of them, and we'll get this stuff cooking. Okay, you want to make sure that you have enough water in your peppers so that they're kind of floating. They will stick up out of the water a little bit, some of them, because they'll float. But try to get enough in there so that they're all floating and they're almost covered. You can kind of poke them down in it as you go along. You can go ahead and turn that on high to bring it to a boil. We're going to turn our rice water on high so it'll come to a boil. And our hamburger meat, we want to cook it and brown it. We'll cook it on medium, maybe a little bit warmer than that. And we're just going to use those onions and some salt and some pepper to flavor that. Whatever baking dish that you use, you do want to make sure you coat it good with oil, because you're going to have the cheese and the rice and stuff, and it will stick to your baking dish and make a mess. You can use some Pam spray or something like that if you want to, but just make sure it's coated good so that everything doesn't stick and it makes it easier to clean. Okay, our rice water's boiling now, so we're going to add the rice to it. When you're cooking long grain rice, it is extremely important that you use your timer, because if you undercook it, it will be crunchy, and if you overcook it, it will be dry. You want to make sure after you add the rice to the water that you stir it so that it's not stuck to the bottom, and you also want to make sure that it comes back to a full boil, and then you're going to turn it down to between low and medium. Cover it and set your timer for 20 minutes. That way your rice will be perfect. Okay, our peppers are boiling now, so I'm going to turn them off. We don't want to completely cook them. All we want to do is blanch them and start to soften them up a little bit. You can kind of smell the peppers cooking a little bit. That's when you know that you have boiled them long enough. Like I said, you don't want to completely cook them because you want some of the flavor from the peppers to get into your rice and your meat and stuff when you put it in the oven and bake it. But you want to soften them up a little bit because you don't want crunchy pepper when this is all done. So I'm going to take these over to the sink and drain them now, and then I'm going to place them in my baking pan while my meat finishes cooking. You do want to get these peppers out of the boiling water before you get everything else done, because they're really, really hot and you have to touch them in order to stuff them. And right now they're too hot to even think about touching. So be careful when you pull them out of there. If they have a little water in them, it's not a big deal. The rice and stuff will soak that up as it cooks. It's not going to make them soggy, but you don't want to leave them full of water either. Okay, don't put this pan that you used to cook your peppers in the sink just yet, because we're going to use it again. Okay, now our hamburger meat's brown, so I'm going to take that pot that we had our peppers in and put it on the stove eye. And instead of taking this hot grease and trying to find something to drain it into, I'm going to very carefully scoop my meat out of the pan and leave the grease behind, because I don't want all this grease in my stuffed peppers. There's already butter in the rice, and there is plenty of fat in the cheese that we're going to be using too, so we don't need all this fat in the hamburger. A lot of fat there. So now I can just set this aside and let it cool and then scrape it in the trash. You do want your ground beef busted up pretty fine for this recipe, and it'll bust up a little bit more as we mix in our rice and our cheese and the rest of the ingredients. I just love it when things work out. There's a timer for our rice. Now, I'm not sure that we're going to use all this rice. What we're going to do is we're just kind of going to add it to this ground beef until it looks like we have about the right combination of rice and beef in here. What that looks like. Well, a little bit more, I think. like I said, I just love it when things work out, and that worked out perfect. That was 1.5 cups of rice and 3 cups of water, and that's about what you want right there. I'm going to turn this down a little bit now. It's still on medium where I was cooking the hamburger. All I'm doing now is I'm combining the rest of my ingredients, and I want to bring this back to almost a boil. I want everything hot when I stuff it in the peppers and I put it in the oven. That way it doesn't take it 5 or 6 hours to bake. If you want, you can use tomato sauce or tomato paste or even diced tomatoes, even fresh tomatoes in this. But it does need a tomato in it. One of the reasons why I like the soup is because it also adds a little bit of liquid to it, but not too much. I really think that's enough, and that was 17 ounces. I'm going to add 2 cups now of shredded cheddar cheese to this. I also like to combine the ingredients on the stove and heat them up because I like this cheese to get mixed in here even. And we're going to sprinkle a little bit more on top of them before we put them in the oven. And that looks pretty good there. That's your stuffing for your stuffed peppers. Okay, we can cut the heat off to this now because we don't want it to stick all to our pan, and we don't want our rice to get burned, or the rice and the cheese to get burned. And all we're going to do now is take our peppers one at a time and scoop this filling in until they are filled up a little past the top. Place them back in the baking dish and repeat. In my case tonight, 12 times. And it's certainly alright if a little slops out and gets down in the pan. When my kids were little, half of them liked the peppers and half of them didn't. So any extra filling that I had, I would pack it in the pan around the peppers, and they would just eat the extra stuff that was around the peppers. They liked the flavor, they just didn't want to eat that pepper. You can see I do have a little left today, so just for old time's sake, I'm going to stuff it here in the end of the pan for the kids. When you make these, you do want to make sure you kind of slide them all close together and pack them in there a little tight. That will keep them from drying out. And if you hold them the way I do to fill them, you are going to get some on your hands, and if your hands are really tender, it can burn you. So if you have really tender hands, you might want to try to stuff them while they're still sitting in a pan. Now the last step before we pop these in the oven, we're just going to sprinkle a tiny bit of finely shredded cheddar cheese on the top. You can use coarse, it'll work just fine. And we're going to stuff these in a preheated 350-degree oven for 30-45 minutes until they're nice and brown and everything bubbles real good. And it won't take long for everything to bubble because we just had everything boiling. Make sure you get a little extra cheese on that stuff in the end for the kids. That looks good. We'll be back to check them when they're ready to come out of the oven. Our peppers have been in the oven for about 45 minutes now, and you can see they're nice and toasty on the top. The peppers are tender now, and everything is well cooked. The flavors are all mixed. So we're just going to put them on a plate, serve them with some fresh vegetables out of the garden. If you like, put a little sour cream on the top. And you got yourself a delicious dinner. Thanks for joining us again in the Hillbilly Kitchen. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.